The Lord be with you and also with you. Let us pray. God, you've given us these lives that we live in this world. You've given us your Spirit to open the selves that we have to one another and to your life. You've given us Julian, who opens us to the reality of your love and our ultimate and unbreakable connection with you and with one another. Lead us, God, on this journey of love, this journey of reconnection, this journey of hope, and continue to bring us safely home into you. In Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. So, friends, I want to thank you, first of all, for joining me from the US, from the UK, from, as I said, even Burundi, to be here. Thank you for joining me to explore what is increasingly an important part of my life, which is really the very intentional effort to live with greater authenticity, with more of myself showing up in the world, being present in the world, and seeing Julian of Norwich and her way of experiencing God and imagining God to be a great support for us as we attempt to allow our souls, our whole selves, to show up more in the world, which is sort of my way of talking about authenticity. All of ourselves, more of ourselves present. And we'll see in the weeks to come that Julian talks about God as enclosing safety, that's today, as indwelling encouragement next week, as accompanying friend, which is the third week, and we're going to round it all out in the fourth week with God as mother. Because the world doesn't always make it easy for us to live with authenticity, with all of ourselves present. But God supports us in this journey. And I think Julian shows us ways that God does love us into this greater authenticity. I do want to point out that you don't have to come to all 4 seminars. Some people are joining us for 1 or 3 or 4. All 4 create a rich whole vision. But if you can't make one, that's okay. And we are recording these in the hope that we'll be able to trim them and then post them through the Friends of Julian website at julianofnorwich.org. So there'll be some follow-up videos as well. And I'm asking that if you have questions about the material, if you would put those in the chat, we will answer some of those at the end of this, but I'll attempt to go back and offer responses to the chat in preparation for next week's session. So questions that you have that arise, we'll put in the chat, and I'll attempt to address those for next week if I don't get to them today. The format of what we're doing, because we have so many people joining us, we can't really have a robust discussion online with 120 voices all speaking across the room. It's going to be more like a webinar format where I will do a little introduction like I'm doing now, and then I will read and offer some commentary on some texts of Julian of Norwich. And then I will be offering you questions for your own reflection. And I want to say that in my mind, the subject of these seminars is you. It is yourself, your own journey into being more authentic in the world, and how Julian might help you with that, and what that's like for you. So the actual item of interest in these seminars is yourself and God's life with you. And the talking I am doing is simply to prepare you for that kind of engagement with your own experience and your own reality, which comes near the end. So if you don't have a piece of paper or a pen ready, you might want to get those. And while you're doing that, I'll mention that at the end of the hour, we're going to pray what's called a daily office to Julian of Norwich. It was an office of prayer that Robert Llewellyn, chaplain of the shrine, created decades ago, in which it's simply a way to honor the fact that Julian's revelations happened in the context of an unremitting round of ecclesiastical prayer, of church prayers. And so I think it's a way for me of having given you an experience of the context in which Julian herself had her experiences and wrote about them. And a reminder that if you can keep yourself muted, that would be fantastic. I'll stop for a moment and just, if any of that is unclear, I'll just ask for questions to come into the chat about moving forward with these seminars, just to make sure we're all on the same page. It looks like we are all can bear with those minimal instructions. Moving forward, I want to say that I have a commitment and a strong commitment to share with you where I am coming from and what my experience is around these texts, because I don't want you to experience what I'm offering today, in my words, as sort of oracular words from on high, some sort of divine truths being plucked out of the ether and dropped into your lives. I would like you to see the context in which I speak, the context from which my desires and my thoughts have arisen, because that will enable you more to decide if what I'm saying resonates and fits with you. And after all, if we're talking about authenticity, that's absolutely key, that you are yourself judging if what I am saying fits and resonates with you. And that's easier to do if it's not offered as some sort of timeless truth, but as something that comes out of my peculiar individual life, because we all have peculiar individual lives. Some of you knew me when I was in the Order of Julian of Norwich in a monastery, and I joined that at 20 years old and lived there for 20 years. And as an aside, I'll say that some of us on this call are aware that Father John Julian's funeral is happening this weekend. He was the founder of this monastery, and we hold him with honor, and we pray for the repose of his soul and in thanks for what he gave us. I was in this monastery for 20 years, and in terms of authenticity, the monastic journey is not so much a journey into esoteric spiritual experiences, but into humility, into really encountering who one is, with directness and immediacy, and becoming more comfortable with that. I left the monastery. I became trained up as a therapist in Norwich at UEA, where I met some of you on this call. And that training and the attempt to offer a therapeutic relationship remains one of the most profound schools of love that I've ever been invited into. A school of relationship and a school of attempting greater and greater authenticity in my being with others. I have a family, a school of love and living with conflict, and moving through conflict to more love. And I'm now in parish ministry, where I am attempting to understand that my call in God is coming to me through and with this community in which I live, and how being authentic is part of the main calling of the clergy person. And I think there are all kinds of pressures against us for living authentically. We can feel that love is conditional, that we'll only really be loved if we behave in a certain way. And for me, that creates a desire to perform and to be excellent. That's like one of my besetting sins, to perform and be excellent. Because if I don't perform, if I'm not excellent, then I might not receive love. But if that condition's there, that severely limits how authentic I can be, because I can't always be excellent, and God doesn't even call me to be excellent. So there can be those conditions of love. There can be desires to be something, to win love. There can be insecurity or a sense of basic unworthiness. And one can finally find oneself a bit cut off, even from one's own self and the world around one. And all of these are pressures that I experience, and I think we all experience, around whether I can be myself in the world, whether who I am can show up in the world. And, it's not like we're going to be authentic or inauthentic. It's the question of how authentic. It's like it's a spectrum. It's a range. And it's about that our souls always want to be in the world in their fullness. We have this inbuilt desire to be fully present, but for various reasons, that's scary or intimidating or impossible. So we constrain that a bit. So we're looking at just increasing ever so gradually the capacity for all of ourselves to be present in our relationships in the world. And with that little bit being said, I'm going to shift now and wonder about Julian's image of God enclosing us as supportive as we journey into this authenticity or more authenticity. And to do that, I'm going to share a slide with some quotes from Julian, which I'll read and offer a little commentary on. Okay. So these are different quotes, and I'll read them in a moment. They'll show on the screen in a moment. All about God being around us, God enclosing us. And here we go. The first one is from chapter 54. And Julian says, "We ought highly to rejoice that God dwells in our soul, and much more highly to rejoice that our soul dwells in God. Our soul is created to be God's dwelling place, and the dwelling place of the soul is God, who is uncreated." Now, when I was a callow young monk, and very irritating to people, I made the point that a lot of the mystics seem really hung up about prepositions. Are we within God? Is God within us? In a way, this metaphor of spatial relationship is it tends to move these mystics a lot. And here Julian is saying that we ought highly to rejoice that our soul dwells in God. So she's beginning to imagine God as the place where we are right now, which is different from the other thing of imagining God within ourselves, which we'll do next week. But for this week, we're just imagining God as the place where we are. God is our dwelling place. In the same chapter, she says that faith is nothing else but a right understanding with true belief and certain trust. Notice for a moment there how it's belief about something, but also trust, which is a release of anxiety to another. So letting go. Faith is nothing else but a right understanding of our being, that we are in God and God is in us, which we do not see. Now there's a properly modernist interpretation of the faith. And she says, and this virtue of faith, with all others that God has ordained to us coming within it, works great things in us. So there's something here about true belief, which is sort of a cognitive, intellectual thing. Like I think it's true that I am in God and God is in me, and certain trust, a releasing of ourselves to this reality, to letting ourselves flow with it. It has more of a thing of affect or emotion to it. And she says that this faith that God is in us and we are in God releases all kinds of virtues to do work in us. And virtue is just a strength of the soul. Going back to chapter 5 in the showings, at this time, it was at this time that I saw this sight of the head bleeding. So she's watching Jesus suffer on the cross. She says, our good Lord showed to me a spiritual vision of his simple loving. I saw that God is to us everything that is good and comfortable for us. God is our clothing, which for love enwraps us and holds us and all encloses us because of his tender love, so that God may never leave us. God is our clothing. Makes me think of St. Paul and putting on Christ. But Julian has something in mind here that's very intimate, very simple. That God is this simple loving, which enwraps us and holds us and closes us so that he may never leave us in that great tenderness. So Julian is inviting us not so much to think about God as clothing, but to remember what it feels like to be clothed and to be held in wellness and enclosed in goodness. A feeling that our clothes give us in the morning as we put them on. And to think that that is God, and it's because he never wishes to leave us. He wants always to be with us. And she says, for as the body is clad in the clothes, and the flesh in the skin, and the bones in the flesh, and the heart in the breast, so are we, soul and body, clad in the goodness of God and enclosed, yea, and even more intimately, because all these others may waste and wear away. But the goodness of God is ever whole and near to us without any comparison. So Julian, of course, lived an enclosed life. She was in an anchor hold. She was physically enclosed in a room or a small apartment. And this image of enclosure, of almost womb-like enclosure of the anchor hold of the monastery, is being spiritualized to begin to imagine God as the enclosure, this loving enclosure that does provide safety and goodness and security. God as this loving enclosure. Then back out to chapter 70, and this is my last quote for today. She says, and therefore, in whatever manner God teaches us, God wills that we perceive God wisely, perceive God sweetly, and keep ourselves in God full of faith. So perceiving how God shows God's self to us, receiving God sweetly, and keeping ourselves in God full of faith. Now for Julian, of course, the revelations were God showing God's self to her and teaching God's self to her, showing and revealing. And, sometimes I think we don't really receive God as sweetly as we could, or we don't receive the goodness of being as sweetly as we could. But really taking the time to receive and savor and know. And then I am really keen on that word keep, the last sentence, and keep ourselves in God full of faith. Keep ourselves in God. It kind of suggests that part of the way that we keep ourselves well, we care for ourselves, is to recall ourselves, to keep ourselves in God, to recall our memory and our feeling and our intellect to the fact that we are in God, as God is in us. And, that word keep, of course, refers to protection and security, the castle keep. And it's something that Julian assigns to God's loving care. God keeps us whole in God's self, and we have a role in keeping ourselves. I hope that you find that somewhat sweet. I mean, it strikes me as somewhat sweet that the idea that we have a role and kind of a stewardship of our own selves. And part of the goodness that we can give ourselves is to keep ourselves in God's goodness, God as enclosure, and really loving and caring for ourselves in that way. Now, I'll tell you how this came to be important to me, because honestly, I'd always been a sort of a God in me kind of person. That preposition thing, that Christ dwells within me, Christ within me, and Christ at the center of my heart had always been the center for me. And this changed for me in the past year, and this whole idea of being enclosed became much more significant for me. Now, I'll tell you why. I'm going to stop the screen share so I'm more on the screen for a moment. There's this book, which I highly recommend, called On Living by Carrie Egan. And Carrie Egan is a hospice chaplain. And in this book, she recounts very directly and with wonderful prose her experience of listening to the stories of people in hospice, people at the end of their lives, people at the beginning of their next lives, you might say. And what tends to come out in the first pages of the book is that every person she talks with and meets in hospice seems to have some story of hurt or of something they don't feel they can reveal, that they're ashamed of, or something peculiar about them that they haven't been able to show the world for their entire lives. And now that they're at the end, they're thinking they take this chance with the hospice chaplain to be real, to actually share with her this burden they've been carrying their entire lives, whatever it's been. And for me, this began to feel very, very tragic as I read that. It really impacted me because she made the point that we're all like this. It's not just these 10 people in the hospice, but in a way, we are presenting ourselves forward to the world as we want to be seen in a certain way. And we're managing stuff that we're not wanting the world to see. We're holding that back and managing it behind ourselves, as it were. So we're presenting something and we're managing something else, and we're trying to make all this work. As I read that book, I just had a very poignant sense of the unbearable, almost unbearable loss of the possibility of relationship, to what she was describing. This fact that we have these stories and yet we don't feel we can bring them to the world or be in them in our worlds. And I'm not talking about accosting every stranger at the bus stop and telling them your whole life story or all the bad things that happened to you. That wouldn't go over well in Norfolk, nor even in North Carolina. I'm not talking about having to tell everybody everything. I'm talking about living with an acceptance with the wholeness of your life story, such that it becomes the very tender means through which you relate to others. So it's not something hurtful and shameful that you're keeping back there while you're trying to be something else. But all that inside can come forward and be a very tender means of attention to the other person. And it just, as I was reading Carrie Egan, this book on living, it just seemed to me utterly tragic that we go through our lives unable to be together at that kind of very simple intimacy that these people were discovering at the last 10 days of their lives in hospice. Could we not be more authentic now? Could we not relate more with this through this truth of our lives and less by virtue of performance and what we're pushing forward to the world? Could that not be true for us in our lives? And so I'm talking again, not about sharing everything that's going on with everybody. That may be an American penchant, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about that the inside of our lives kind of becomes the outside and becomes the means for being with others. So that my interior life is not something that I hold and manage back there with all this crazy stuff that I don't want you to know. But it becomes so accepted, it becomes my means of being with you. And this struck me so profoundly that I thought, well, what if I walked out into the world today or tomorrow with all the stories of my life? And, you know, we all have stories of hurt and difficulty. And I thought, what if I walked out into the world with those more as my outside and encountered the people in the tenderness that that elicits? What would that be like? And of course, you might guess it was a little bit scary. And it's not, I can't say that I've done that and moved on to something else. I mean, it's something that I experiment with day to day, some days more than others. But the point of this initial working around enclosure and God as enclosure and God as security and God as safety around us is that if God is loving enclosure around me, then it felt more safe. It felt easier to bring all that inside stuff to be more my outside, to bring more of my truth to be how I live with others and how I connect with others. So having God imagined as a love enclosing was a space in which I could move into the world with more of myself there, not just my performing self that's doing stuff to win love, but the self of me that's unsure, that doesn't know the way forward, that is unsure about things, unsure about life. And that it's that self that's also very innocently open to the wonder of you, the wonder of each other, the wonder of this creation. God around us provides a security that I think allows us to be more authentic. And going on from this and living past that moment of kind of conviction with Carrie Egan, and a little bit of conversion and trying something different in my life, I think this just becomes part of the way that I invite myself then into prayer, into conversations, into walking down the streets here in Hillsborough, North Carolina. It's a wonderment about God being around and more of myself being safe then to show up. So that's why this means a lot to me. And that's why I started this seminar series here, because this has been very poignant in the past few months. And what I'd like to do is now shift gears a bit and invite you into that place of reflection. I I'm going to look a little bit, before we do that, I'm gonna look a little bit at the questions. The author of the book On Living, her name is Carrie Egan, Kerry, Carrie Egan, Egan. And it's a widely available book these days. There's been I'm sorry for David, the slide's been pixelated. We'll work on that. And there's been a comment that enclosure sounds to me an integration between being at home, both in solitude and community. How do we and how can I approach this? Does Julian offer clues here? Well, that's a huge question. I think, enclosure obviously has monastic and anchoritic overtones. You go to the room of your own, to give a nod to Sarah Law and Virginia Woolf. You go to that space where you can discover your authenticity and articulate that with and for yourself. But then what is it like to come out into community and to be that integrated self with others and to be in relationship with others? And that's where I think we need the support, because others tend to trigger what is less authentic in us. How can I approach this? I don't know for right now. Don't have a quick answer to that. But that's something I'll muse on and come back to that for next week. I would like to go ahead and invite you into some questioning. Again, the point of these reflections is to invite you to reflect on your own being in God. So I'm going to go back and share the slides. I'm going to make this bigger to see if I can't make it a little easier to see for people. And some questions. And I would like you to have, it's really helpful if you write this out. I think it's great to think things and to wonder things, but when you write it out, something else happens. So I'm really encouraging you to go ahead and get a piece of paper and a pen, and to just begin to reflect on paper with some of these questions. And again, I have to say that if a question just seems bizarre or unpalatable or impossible, please just ignore it, leave it. There's no compulsion to do everything here. This is meant to be helpful to you insofar as it seems helpful to you. So I'm going to ask you first, what struck you most? What image or word touched you in the Julian readings? Okay, so take a moment, like what touched you most? Was it the idea of our soul dwelling in God or God dwelling in us? Was it the way she described faith as a certain belief and trust that we are in God and God is in us? Was it the clothing? Was it the sense of goodness and bodily and wrapping in flesh and bone? Was it a sense of keeping ourselves and being kept? What touched you in those readings? And I'd write that down. For me today, it was the phrase, and he will, so that he may never leave us. As I read those, it was so he may never leave us, but you know what it was for you. And I just want to take a moment and let you savor that. Really receive how that touched you. Like, don't run on and think other things and do something, but just spend a moment with that word or phrase and really, as Julian says, receive it sweetly. Receive it with savor. And you might just want to repeat that word in yourself quietly. Give it space to echo inside of you, to sound like a bell. Then I wonder if you want to take a minute or two to write how this touched you or what it means to you. So we'll just take a minute or so to write down how how the reading from Julian touched us today, what that one thing meant to you. I'm going to go back to the slide with the quotes for a moment. While people are finishing that up, I'll say that I did jump right into the middle of Julian, as is my wont. For those of you who are new to her, she was a 14th century mystic and theologian living in Norwich, England. And this book that these quotes are from it goes by different names, but the most common name is The Revelations of Divine Love. The Revelations of Divine Love. Sometimes the showings, but if you look for Julian and Revelations, and on this slide, the chapter number for the long text of these quotes is in that red. It's a red number by each quote. But it's all from the Revelations of Divine Love, the long text. I'm going to go back to the questions. Just want you to reflect for a moment if you've had a relationship in your life in which you felt contained or held or securely kept by the affection of another. Perhaps it was a person or a landscape or an experience. A sense of being surrounded and kept safe inside goodness. I mean, have you had an experience of being just enclosed in goodness? Because that was Julian's experience of God, was being enclosed in a marvelous, intimate goodness that just cared for her. Have you had some little glint of that in your life? Some people have had a sense of profound oneness with the natural world. Some people find this in relationships and friendships, or just in those odd moments that, as Yeats said, I was blessed and could bless outside of the coffee shop, I think. Held by goodness. And then ask you to take a moment now and imagine God holding and containing you as clothing or as a hand enfolding you. Can we give ourselves permission to savor this, to really let ourselves know this through our imaginations, to know that we are enclosed in goodness? Hmm. This is another question. And this is really for your own discernment and definitely not inviting people into anything scary or difficult while we're online in this webinar. But there might be a part of your life that, you kind of feel like, I really wish that could be more here. There's a part of me that I wish I could have more here in my life, more forward, not so managed behind me, but just more forward. There may be something in your life like that. Again, this is all about authenticity, is about growing in authenticity, and that's about having more of you there, more of you able to be there to relate to other people through. So you're more capable of relationship, more capable of connecting. But is there a part of yourself that you kind of feel right now, it's like, I'm 51, darn it all. And if I want to crochet blankets, I'm going to crochet blankets. There may be something that's just like, I want that to be part of my life. I want that to be part of my life with others in the world, part of how I'm living. And I just wondered in my written question, it's like, what would you say to that part of you? Are you scared of it? Do you like it? And then, instead of trying to figure out what to do with that part of yourself, wonder about, is it helpful for you, to the idea of giving it to God's care? And like you're here with that part of you in God's care. It's a little different. Like, so we're not trying to manage things, we're not trying to make something happen, but there may be that, for me, it goes back to experiences of hurt and difficulty, and sometimes want to hide those away, but like, what if they can be here with God's care all around us? Then there's more of me that showed up. And God has been waiting for that more to show up. It's going to happen. It's either this life or the next. I mean, thank God we belong. This Christianity thing, it's about all that we are is redeemed, is made part of joy, and given its bliss in God, its happiness. And even sin is used to become glory. It's just it's an amazing gift. Those are my sort of little questions for today. Initially, I called them research questions. I thought that was a little bit too serious, but it's like a little bit of research into what it'd be like to be more of yourself in the world, in the more of God. What would that be like? I'm just going to go back and put the Julian quotes back on the screen. And I have we have 5 minutes or so for some questions. And I appreciate Ann Welsh. Thank you for putting the Julian's revelations in the chat in response to Heather's question. And noticing that we do have the Friends of Julian have a Twitter channel with all kinds of Juliana in it, which is fascinating. And Ann Welsh helps us with that, makes it happen. If you'd like to ask a question or share something in the chat, maybe we can bring that forward. And if there's not more, then I will go back to the prayer office, and we'll end with the prayer office. So there's a question about the quotes in the slides, and for sure, I will. What I'll do is I have that email list I sent you the reminder emails on, not from Zoom, but from me, and I will. In preparing for next week, I'll send you out the slides for this week, which will include the quotes and the questions, and then try to answer some other questions if they arise, and remind you about next week's time. So that'll come out over the weekend. Oh no, Mark Woolard has asked it's just really difficult questions, right? How do I manage my desire for intimacy with others without it being misinterpreted? And it's such, I find, Mark, that it's such a painful process of navigating this realm of relationship sometimes. And that dance we do when we meet people and we attempt to find out if we can safely communicate, and we make mistakes and we get hurt. I don't think there's any safety to that or protection from that, except that the relationship continues and you can make corrections or not if the person wants to stay with you in that relationship. But it is such a difficult. No two human beings come forward and are authentic in the first moment. We're still trying to suss out, are you a friend or an enemy? When we first meet, it's like, am I anxious about you or do I like you? And from there we go on. It's a very complicated little dance. I think with that, I am going to move to this little devotion. When Julian lived in her anchor hold in Norwich, she was called an anchorite, which is like a nun, but she lived alone under vows. And part of her rule was that she would have recited the prayers of the church for many hours every day. And so much so that Robert Llewellyn, who was the chaplain at the Julian Shrine, wondered if she had to take time off from that for quiet contemplation, because it was just this ongoing round of spoken prayers, which Julian was committed to. And really that served to enmesh her in this world of Scripture and the imagery of Scripture. And it would have been the kind of the metaphorical world to which she would have interpreted all of her experience. And so I thought, offer one of these little prayer offices. It was created by Father Robert Llewellyn a couple of decades ago. It's just a recitation of some Scripture and some prayers. And that's why we're doing this, just to give a sense of Julian's context. I kept it in a somewhat archaic 1980s language, and I tried to replace a lot of the hymns with gender neutral or gender expansive language. But I kept some of the archaicness. I think it's kind of interesting. So the way we do this in my parish when we have like a Zoom service is that I will speak the service, and you at home, you see this on your screen, your lines are in bold. Now you're all muted because if 120 people try to respond at once on Zoom, it's just terrible. But we will have one person, and that's Laura. Laura, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Great. So Laura will be the responder, and she will lead your part with all of you. So your part is in the bold, and my part is in the not bold. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Wait in stillness upon God. Be strong.
And he shall comfort your heart.
Lord, have mercy.
Christ, have mercy.
Lord, have mercy. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. My soul waits patient upon God.
For of God comes my salvation.
God is my strength and my salvation.
God is my defense, so that I shall not fall.
And God is my health and my glory.
The rock of my might, and in God is my trust.
Put your trust in God always.
Pour out your hearts before God, for God is our hope.
And then Psalm 84. And again, it's really nice when you're at home to say the bold parts. It makes it feel a little bit more real. Oh, how amiable are thy dwellings, thou Lord of hosts.
My soul hath a desire and a longing to enter into the courts of the Lord. My heart and my flesh rejoice in the living God.
Yea, the sparrow hath found her an house, and the swallow a nest where she may lay her young. Even thy altars, O Lord of hosts, my King and my God.
Blessed are they that dwell in thy house. They will be always praising thee.
Blessed is the one whose strength is in thee, in whose heart are thy ways.
Who going through the vale of misery use it for a well, and the pools are filled with water.
They will go from strength to strength, and unto the God of gods appeareth every one of them in Zion.
O Lord God of hosts, hear my prayer. Hearken, O God of Jacob. Behold, O God, our defender, upon the face of thine anointed.
For one day in thy courts is better and look than 1,000.
I had rather be a doorkeeper in the house of my God than to dwell in the tents of ungodliness.
For the Lord God is a light and defense. The Lord will give grace and worship, and no good thing shall God withhold from them that live a godly life.
O Lord God of hosts.
I'm sorry, Laura. Forward to the slide a moment too early.
Okay.
This is a reading from the Revelations of Divine Love. It is God's will that we should rejoice with God in our salvation, and that we should be cheered and strengthened by it. He wants our soul to delight in its salvation through God's grace. For we are God's joy. God delights in us forever, as we shall in God by God's grace.
Thanks be to God.
God of your goodness, give me yourself, for only in you I have all.
God of your goodness, give me yourself, for only in you I have all.
Glory to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit.
God of your goodness, give me yourself, for only in you I have all.
You have restored us by your precious passion.
and you keep us in your blessed love.
Let us pray. Most holy Lord, the ground of our beseeching, who through your servant Julian revealed the wonder of your love, grant that as we are created in your nature and restored by your grace, our wills may be made one with yours, that we may come to see you face to face and gaze on you forever.
Amen.
I invite your personal prayers and intercessions. Pray today. I think we pray for the people in Afghanistan, people in crisis there in Haiti. Pray for our healthcare workers. The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Let us bless the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
The grace of our Lord Jesus Christ and the love of God and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us now and always.
Amen.
So friends, that was a little hour-long sort of exploration about enclosure and our safety in God. And next week, we reverse it and we look at God dwelling within us as our encouragement that gives us big hearts and strong hearts with joy for living in this world, which is a whole different way of looking at things. So join us next week. I will send you the slides, the quotes, the questions, any other questions in the chat I'll try to look at, and a reminder about next week's time and place. So God bless you all, and I'll see you next week. Take care.
God bless.